Jersey Apple. He's a funny guy.
Welcome to the Dangerously Funny Podcast. We're in season 2, and today we got a biggie. We have a CIA agent and a big guy on the entertainment news with his technical analysis and security expert, Mr. Mike Baker. And Mike, it's a privilege to have you come on my podcast, and I wanted to say thanks for coming on.
Oh. No, hey, man, happy to do it. Looking forward to it. And thanks very much for asking.
No, my pleasure. So the big thing that I'm so impressed with you about is you were a CIA agent for, 15 years?
Yeah, going on 20.
20
yeah,
years.
Almost 20 years.
And you transform yourself through a paradigm shift into a career in the entertainment industry, going on like Joe Rogan and Gutfeld and all these things. And you have the President's Daily Brief. You have all these different things you do. And I just thought it was really compelling and amazing that a person at a middle-aged job, when they leave it, you have a whole new career. And I wanted to know, how does a guy do that? That amazed me.
Well, I'm just looking to find something that I can do well. I'm still hunting around. You know what? It was just a matter of good fortune. Actually, I think you can't discount luck. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I often say all the operations that we did in the agency. You know, you do a lot of planning, right? You got to get your homework done before you rock up on something, and so. You know, you do that, but I don't know, I can't think of any operation that I was involved in that had a level of success where there wasn't some element of luck involved, right? And maybe you make your own luck, I don't know. But so getting out of the agency, first of all, they were very good to me. They were, I was just going to leave, and they constructed it so that I could say where I worked, right? And obviously I keep my pie hole shut about the things that we did and the sources and methods and all the rest of the important parts of it. But they were very good in saying, no, you should be able to say that you worked here, because you clearly, you're going to go off and do something else, whatever that is. And so they were very considerate, and so I've always appreciated that. And then we got started in a business. I started a company with a very close friend of mine who was in the British teams, SBS, and then had gone to Five. And so Nick and I started a company in the intelligence and security services realm because we didn't have any other skills. We didn't know what else to do.
Right.
And we got very fortunate in the people that we hired.
Right.
We started hiring people that were smarter than us, which wasn't hard to find.
Right.
So, and then, we've been building it ever since. And then round about the time when the first time went into Iraq. So the beginning of 2003, one of our investors from a great lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. called Barbara Griffith Rogers, a great guy, Ed Rogers, along with his partners, Haley Barber and Lanny Griffith, who's unfortunately dead now. Ed came in and said, hey, Fox News needs a talking head, right, to talk about Iraq. And you guys are out there all the time, and you've got a bunch of guys out there providing some assistance and security services. So can you go over to Fox and just talk about what's happening in Iraq right now?
Right.
And we had only been in business as a company for a relatively short while. And so when I went over there and we did this, I'm sorry to disappear down this rabbit hole, but it all kind of comes together, is I found out that right up front, they said our company name, right? And then all I had to do was spend 3 minutes talking about shit that I already knew about because we were out there.
Like free promotion for your business almost.
Free promotion for the business. And so from that point on, I thought, well, that's great. We couldn't afford, we were a tiny little business, no real capital to speak of. And so that was a pretty powerful moment. And I figured out that all you had to do was, not be a moron, not fall off your stool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just use your knowledge. And so that was kind of how that developed. And then, in part as a result of that, I started doing work in the TV and film business, as a consultant at first, and then started working on a couple of shows, and then hosted some shows for Discovery and some others.
What was the one for Discovery that you did? I read that in your Wikipedia.
Yeah, that was called Black Files Declassified.
And what was that about?
That was I appreciate you mentioning that. That was a great show. We had a lot of fun working on that. It was multiple seasons, and the whole premise was let's figure out what the government's doing. And if you're going to find out what the government's doing, you have to kind of look at the budgets and the money, right? Where are they spending their money? And somewhere in those numbers, you'll find something that will tell you, about a project or about an operation or something that they're doing. And so that was the initial premise of that show. And we traveled all over hell and back, just visiting and talking to fascinating people and experiencing some very bizarre things. And so that was a good ride. But I mean, to get back to your original question, it was, just a lot of things kind of fell into place. We worked our asses off, but at the same time, there was some luck involved.
Speaking of that, Mike, I'm seeing they want to maybe do something with the JFK and the RFK files that are classified, and they may want to open them up. What's your thought on that? Because you were just talking about your show. This kind of almost relates to that. Yeah,
no, you're right. Look, we did some fairly deep investigations on some of the episodes into the JFK assassination, which is pretty well trodden ground, right? I mean, there's been a lot of people digging through that over the decades.
Yeah.
But we did some interesting work on that assassination. We did some very interesting work on Martin Luther King's assassination.
Really?
Looking at RFK. So
you think you're getting answers?
Well, I don't know that we're going to get any answers, but I'm glad that they're releasing everything. Or again, you don't get out over our skis. Hopefully they'll release everything.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to get any sort of silver bullet or smoking gun. I don't think that's going to be in there. Just because, and so I think what's going to happen is people are going to be unsatisfied at the end of the day. There'll still be a variety of conspiracy theories or just theories, however you want to refer to them.
You don't think nobody will ever get a straight answer, you think?
Yeah, I just don't think there's a straight answer in there in any of the documents. So if we had 99% of the JFK files, the material's already been released or had been released. And so, yes, get it all out there. But I think that, some of the material that was redacted, some of the reasons for holding on to material and not releasing it were fairly pedestrian. Documents that had somebody's social security number in it or an address. And I think, if anything, there's probably more information about what the CIA and what the FBI knew about Lee Harvey Oswald, because he was definitely on their radar.
Right.
The guy had lived in the Soviet Union, for crying out loud, right? He'd gone down to Mexico to visit the Russian embassy or the Soviet embassy and the Cubans, and he was desperate to be part of that revolution. So he was definitely on the CIA and FBI's radar, but I think there'll be information about how they handle that information. Clearly, if they got on him, right?
What do you think about the theory, the mob got him in, the father knew the mob to get him in, and then RFK was the attorney general and went against the mob, and they knocked RFK off for the same reason. Do you think that theory's valid, the mob? I kind of think that theory sounds valid. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it merits more investigation, it merits more exploration, and more transparency. Because there's no doubt about it. Look, the mob hated RFK, right? I mean, there was no doubt about that.
You almost wonder why RFK did that when the mob got him in through the father. You almost wonder why. And then when he ran, he got killed. So you almost wonder what he was thinking. Am I right?
Well, who knows what he was thinking? Maybe he was thinking he was above it, I don't know. But yeah, things like that, there's no doubt. I mean, you look at Jack Ruby and the shooting of Oswald, and there's a lot of theories surrounding that. So it's important to have the transparency, certainly after all these years. There's no reason.
I agree. It's been, 50, 60 years already, right? 60 years.
Exactly.
So, Mike, I'm astounded by your CIA career, and I would love to know, what was your most memorable moment in the CIA, and what operative did you do that really stands out, where, you made a difference, and it was because of you got the result you wanted? Was there any one thing that stands out in your career? Yeah, I mean,
look, here's the bottom line. There is, yes, there were some moments where you walk away and you think, you know what, nobody else on the planet right now at this moment is doing this. And so, because, you don't do it for the money, right? I started out making $17,000 a year.
Do they pay well, Mike, or no? Is it a government job that pays a government salary? Do they pay well as you grow in the career? Or is it a government salary?
Well, it pays. It pays according to a government schedule, what they call a GS schedule. And so you can look at that and you can say, even if I'm a rocket, right? I'm only moving this fast, relatively speaking. So that was one of the reasons why eventually, aside from the fact that I was taking care of my daughter as a single dad, is that I needed to get out, right? And I didn't retire. I was definitely not old enough to retire. So I kind of tossed out my pension and everything else just to see what was on the other side in the private sector. But part of it was also, I didn't like the idea that no matter what you did, you always had a ceiling, right? That was as much as you were going to make. Not that not that money's everything, but after a while, of traveling around the world,
incentive if you're not going to get paid good if you're like killing it and doing great, almost.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an element of that is good for some people. Some people like that, right? It provides comfort and structure, and you're kind of safe, right? I mean, within the government structure. But I found it I just found it the opposite. I didn't like it. And I wanted to see what else was out there. But as on the operational side, you sign agreements, and I signed agreements.
Can you talk about things now that you're not?
Can't talk about, yeah. And so it's they refer to it as sources and methods. And so there's, in specific terms, you don't talk. You keep your pie hole shut until you go under.
It's almost like a glorified mob. You're not allowed to say anything. Like Fabinici would come at you and say, if you talk, you end up with a meat hook in Bayonne, almost. You're not allowed to talk.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, you're keeping the family secrets.
Yeah.
So it is.
Fabinici, right?
That's a great analogy.
Fabinici?
Yeah.
Marco Mangananzo. You know these guys. It's almost like the glorified government. What career, Mike, do you like better? Do you like the CIA? Do you like your entertainment career better? Or does each one you like and they have a different reason you like them?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head there at the end. You got to find challenges wherever you happen to be. And what I do now, the company that we've built over the years, it's called Portman Square Group. That's in the intelligence and security services and investigation space. So there's transferable moments, and you're still doing some things, and so that there's some similarities there. But on the other side of it, the podcast, the work in TV and elsewhere, that's decidedly different. So it's kind of hard to compare and say I like one more than the other. I will say that you have to, if you're going to be happy, then you have to find and enjoy challenges with whatever you're doing. Okay. Otherwise, you're just sitting around being a miserable son of a bitch.
You make things work no matter what the situations. I guess you really learned that in the CIA, right?
Yeah, you do. They give you a lot of responsibility at a very young age, depending on what you're doing over there. Look, they got a wide variety of jobs inside the agency. But if you're in operations, depending on what you're doing, they give you a lot of responsibility at a young age. And you learn how to, you learn field expediency, you learn how to adapt quickly, you learn how to make decisions very quickly, with less than perfect information. You learn how to evaluate risk versus gain very quickly. It teaches you a lot. And sometimes you don't even realize you're learning it.
It makes you successful in whatever else you do in life because you're already really disciplined and trained.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's not unlike the military, right? I mean, I've always been amazed at corporations out there that don't understand when they get a candidate coming in for a job in the private sector, and that person's been, in the military, and maybe they did, 4 or 5 deployments out in Iraq, and they were leading fire teams, or they were, whatever their roles were. Sometimes I'm surprised that corporations don't understand. You're staring at somebody who's been tested and has leadership qualities that can't be taught, in graduate school or with an MBA.
Right. That's a guy in the field doing the real deal. That's a guy you hire on the spot.
You said it better than I did. That's right. That's more eloquent.
Any Mike CIA tricks you learned to get out of a fight with the wife or get out of a speeding ticket? I need to know that.
Hey, I tell you one thing. And my wife, who's the greatest person I'll ever know, I completely outkicked my coverage. Is that I have gotten out of more speeding tickets simply by the fact that they'll walk up and we'll stand there for a second, and then they'll go, you're that guy from Rogan, or you're that guy from the Gutfeld show, or I've seen you on some show, and then we'll start talking, and they're great people, and they're doing a damn difficult job, but more often than not, they'll go, okay, just don't do this again. Be careful.
You don't even need a PBA card; they just recognize you. That is hysterical.
Yeah, so it works out. But
That's funny.
Yeah, on the other side, on the home front, you just got to listen, right? You don't necessarily need to solve things, but you got to listen.
What's more harder, Mike, the CIA operations or the kids' birthday parties? I know you're a dad now. More difficult.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, those early days, those young years of the birthday parties, those were pretty damn difficult. But
sleepless nights when they're young, right?
Our boys are older now, Scooter and Sluggo and Muggsy, they're older. My daughter's older. And so, it's just a joy. There's nothing at the end of the day. You got your health and you got your family.
Yeah. So let's pretend that Mike Baker is down in Hollywood. What's the name in the movie about you, and what actor is going to play you?
Probably Danny DeVito.
No, stop. Come on, be serious. Danny DeVito. How about like Brad Pitt? Somebody like that, or Tom Cruise.
Yeah. You know what? I wouldn't be unhappy if it was, say, Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, like a James Bond guy.
That dude's pretty sharp. I'd probably be, getting out over my skis if I said George Clooney. People would be like, okay, now the guy's full of himself. Yeah. But, or Will Ferrell.
What about the title of the movie? What would the title of the movie be?
The Lucky Douchebag.
The Lucky Douchebag.
I don't know. It's a good question because I do like the idea of trying to figure out who would play you. I think that's a good role. Frankly, I would probably end up with Larry David in my role.
Oh, Larry. So it would be a comedy, almost.
There would be. I would hope it would be a comedy. Yeah, maybe something like Central Intelligence with Kevin Hart and The Rock, where it's there's some action, but it's also mostly funny. I mean, we did some stuff. I can't talk about sources and methods, but I worked with some great people at the agency. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it.
Was there any absurd or awkward moment during your CIA career, something that happened goofy by accident, that was a faux pas, or anything that you can talk about that just you can look back and laugh about it, but maybe you didn't laugh about it when it happened?
Oh, there were times when we definitely. Inside we were laughing, but we thought, okay, this is probably maybe a psychotic reaction to what's happening right in the moment. Yeah. Look, you got to have a big risk appetite, but again, it kind of falls down that sources and methods. I will say there are times now, and look, I've been fortunate to maintain friendships with some of the guys, and so if we get together for drinks, and there are things that we'll talk about, some of the past operations, and we'll just think, oh my God, I can't even believe that happened, and we got away with it, or whatever it may be. But we can't, again, it's sources and methods. I take that very seriously because, again, the outfit has been very good to me over the years. And I take those agreements, those secrecy agreements, very seriously.
I got you. You're a loyal, old school guy. And you know what? Unfortunately, Mike, they're not people like you and me. They're not around anymore. The new generation is totally different. Was your life, Mike, ever in danger in any of these operations, like seriously in danger?
Yeah, we had, look, I was very fortunate to, when I was there, the time frame that I was there was a lot happening. And we also, going back to that risk appetite thing, the agency had a very healthy risk appetite. And that comes and goes, right? So it kind of hits cycles depending on what happens. And so, there were moments when you thought, okay, well, that's, and to be honest, by the time I got out, it was clear that, I had a young daughter, and, if
you're
thinking,
take the risk as much, now you have a family and kids.
Right? And so at a certain point, when you start, thinking about that, then it may be time to punch the clock, So Um, but yeah, there were moments, and it was because we were given the opportunity to engage in operations where there was definitely a risk, but it outweighed, or sorry, the gain potentially outweighed that risk. And then the problem is sometimes with the agency is they get their ass kicked fairly consistently up on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And if you go through a period like that where take post 9/11, the interrogation program, right? Mm-hmm. We got our ass kicked for the interrogation program, and which there was just all sorts of misinformation about that program and Gitmo and the way things were run down there. It was a very buttoned up operation. But, the narrative, the left took the high ground on that and, did a very good job of the messaging. Frankly, do I have any angst over, hitting a terrorist over the head with a 2x4? No, not whatsoever. Right. But I get it. I understand why, the agency got its ass kicked, I guess, at the end of the day. But what I'm saying is, in a rambling way, is that then creates a risk aversion because you don't want to keep going up on Capitol Hill and getting your ass kicked.
So it makes you afraid to do your job almost, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Which is,
but
you're paid to do your job.
Yeah.
You do it, they holler at you. So you're like, what do I do? Right? You feel almost, your hands are.
Yeah. And we had moments like that. You'd explain the risk, to headquarters if you're out in the field, and you'd say, okay, look, potentially this thing could go sideways, and here's all the details and everything. And then if things do go sideways, suddenly, you got people running for cover, right? And up on Capitol Hill, the politicians say, well, we had no idea this was happening. And of course they did. They get briefed all the time.
Right.
And so, but the game is that they can act all surprised and shocked, and even though they knew what the hell was going on.
Hey, Reagan was an actor. There were a lot of actors on Capitol Hill.
So some good, some bad.
Right.
So it's. I think they go through these periods where they're more risk averse than they are, understanding of the fact that, look, the agency is a risk taking organization. So you better be willing to take those risks. Otherwise, shut it down, right? Because it's not serving the national security interests.
Right. Let's say, Mike, that tomorrow the CIA called and said, come back, and you came back, Mike, as the CEO. What would you change and do that they're not doing today?
Part of it would be that making sure that we've calibrated that risk versus gain equation properly. Make sure that people understand that it is a risk-taking organization. Make sure that you have to do that calculation, right, before anything kicks off. But understand which side you need to lean on, because, you are in the business of pursuing national security objectives, right, and keeping this country safe. And so that would be part of it. I would probably harden our training programs, which have softened over the years.
Okay.
I would make it more difficult to get through the early training programs.
Toughen them up a little more early to see if they're going to be able to do it.
Yeah. And then I would ensure that people know that, look, if you don't agree, the agency is an apolitical. It's supposed to be an apolitical organization.
Right.
So if you're thinking about coming on board and you don't have the ability to set your own personal political beliefs aside, regardless of who's in charge, right? And go get another job. That's fine. Right. Yeah, go get another job.
Yeah.
So there's certain things that you do, and then reward excellence, right? Make sure that you set the bar very high, and anybody above that bar, you're rewarding that excellence. You make sure that everybody understands the mission entirely, and that everybody's on the same sheet of music. These are some of these things are obvious, I guess, in a way. But you have to do that. And then, again, it's you have to make sure that you're addressing sort of the morale of the organization, and those people just want to do their job, right? So don't get in their way. As the top line management, you've explained the mission, you've explained what the risk versus gain appetite is, right? You people are on the same sheet of music. You've created an environment where you've been recruiting, for excellence.
Right.
Now you've set the bar high. You're rewarding excellence. But then get the hell out of the way. Let people do their jobs.
Right. I agree with that. So switching the subject over, Mike, I want to talk about Trump. Are you a Trump fan? Are you a Democrat or Republican?
You know what? I'm a Republican. I'm a small government Republican.
Okay.
I may be one of the last of the sort of the centrists, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in. I think the reality of it has changed, and I'll say why. But I'm a big believer in the idea that shit really doesn't get done unless there's an element of compromise within, the political system. Mm-hmm. But I'll say that doesn't necessarily work because the sides have hardened so much, right?
Yeah.
So you try to compromise with a Democrat Party, for instance, that's really gathered around the hardest members on the left, mm-hmm. right? Because I don't know what they're thinking, doubling down on boys and girls sports, or doubling down on trying to bring back deported illegal immigrants, right, who have criminal convictions, or that. I just don't understand what their thought process is. But I think you do have to, if there's moderates, on both sides in that mix, I think that's where shit can really get done.
You need cooperation, right, Mike?
Yeah, you need cooperation. You need to at least be able to listen to another side without throwing a hand grenade, right? And I like I like a lot of things about the sort of the Trump mindset. I like the speed of movement. I like sort of the disruption. I like the fact that you're worried about national security interests first and foremost. Right. You're actually trying to rebalance trade, which has been out of whack for some time. You're calling out China on all their bullshit that they've engaged in. So there's a lot of good things. Do I think that the President Trump, creates self-inflicted wounds at times? Sure. Yeah, because that's just he's a tri-state developer, right?
He gets stuff done, though. He's a man of action, right, Mike? You can't deny that. And he moves quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can disagree. You can disagree with him, and you can say, "Okay, I don't like his personality. I don't need to like a politician. I need to like the policies."
Yeah, and the effectiveness of the person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
I had a question talking about China. With their intelligence operations now and where you feel they're at, and then with the tariffs, they seem to be one of the few countries that are reciprocating with us. With the tariff war situation, I wanted to get your take on that situation.
Yeah, this is a difficult one because you can't approach China like you would a wide number of other countries out there, right? Yeah. Because they're not they don't process things the same way. Right. The regime's mindset is just entirely different. And so I think it's no surprise that their response was to retaliate in a fairly heavy fashion, right? And kind of matching President Trump's tariffs, tit for tat. Mm-hmm. And then they've done some other things. Look, they basically have a monopoly on the refining of rare earth or critical minerals. Yeah. And those are minerals that you need to do everything from chip production to batteries for your EVs to parts in your national security elements in terms of military hardware. Mm-hmm. And so they've said, no, we're not going to export anymore.
Right. And they know they got you by the balls almost.
They know they got you, right?
Exactly.
And they're willing to play that card. Yeah. So, look, everybody talks about the Chinese economy and how it's going to be hurting in quick order from this. And they're not wrong, right? Right. They're an export economy, and that's what they depend on. And ports have dried up. The ships aren't moving. Warehouses are full of materials that aren't being shipped. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, they're going to hurt. But I guess what I'm saying is there's pain on both sides. But there's a reason behind it, and it gets lost in the chaos because it's President Trump, and most of the media and certainly the left hates Trump, and they don't. It doesn't matter whether there's some logic to this trade war with China. They're just going to say nope, it's all bad, and so the chaos can be a problem, but the chaos could also create some better economics for the U.S. down the road. It's just I'm hoping that it gets itself sorted out sooner rather than later, because I think we won't feel the pain as immediately as the the Chinese regime will, but we will feel it eventually.
Right. So I have a question for you, Mike, because I'm fascinated by you and your drive. Were you from England? Were you born in
Yeah,
England?
I was born in London, and
But you
so
moved here when you were
I've still
young?
got my. I'm a dual citizen. I've still got my citizenship. Yeah.
Did you move here young?
Moved to we lived in the UK, and then we lived in Australia.
Okay.
I was here for a year of high school in the States. I mean,
So
and
you
then
came
went to
here like
university in the
when you were
States.
like 12?
Yeah, let's see. We left Australia when I was how old was I? 15.
Okay, so you were over there for quite a while through when you were real young.
Yeah, and then I've lived over there for years since then.
I got you.
The last time I was there for I don't know 7 or 8 years.
And do you like? I'm just talking little personal stuff with you because I'm getting to know you. Do you like it over there better or here, or it doesn't matter?
Oh, you know what? I think there's parts of the UK that I love. Right? There's elements of it. I guess at heart, you know what? I always say this. Like one day when I retire, our youngest boy Muggsy is he's still in middle school, so I'm not going to retire anytime soon. But when I do, I always joke around. People say, "What the hell are you going to do?" And my answer is always, "Well, I think we'll move to a small village in the Cotswolds in the countryside of England. And, I'll solve a murder once a year. Maybe we'll make a TV show about it."
Tom Jones, when his wife passed, he moved back because he felt he lost his home roots. The one thing, Mike, that I never understood about the English people, that they don't eat the muffins. And I couldn't figure it out because I'm over there at the Corinthian Hotel and they're all eating bagels, and I had to go talk to King Charles about it, and we figured it out, and he took care of it. But I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
Thank God you got that sorted out, man. Thank God. I'm very happy you got that sorted out. Yeah, but no, look,
I spoke
love
to him twice. The first time he didn't understand, and when I got a hold of Camille, things got fixed.
Yeah. She's a little more direct.
Correct.
But but look, the U.S. is an amazing place, and we're incredibly happy. We live out in Idaho, which is an amazing, terrific state in the country, and if you like outdoor activities, if you like to hunt, you fish, you raft, you climb, you hike, whatever. Right. This is one of the greatest places in the country, and we've been very lucky to raise our boys out here.
So I wanted to talk to you, Mike, about the President's Daily Brief. I was reading a little bit about that, and it looks like the president has updates every day, and that you're very informed and you're very smart. And I watched a little bit of that. I would like you to tell the viewers a little about, because that's your baby, isn't it? President's Daily Brief. Is that your baby?
I'd like to claim credit for it, but I can't. I'm not, I'm not smart enough to come up with it. I was actually contacted. The operation that oversees that and produces it is called Red Seat Ventures, and they have First TV and a variety of other enterprises. But Red Seat is a great operation. Chris Balfe and Nick Rizzuto and a bunch of guys out there that make all this come together, and they handle a variety of podcasts. But they had called me, going on a couple of years ago, and said, "Hey, look, we have this thing. The idea is." You do 20 minutes in the morning on a podcast. You do 10 minutes in the afternoon. It's just the key stories of the day globally, right? Not just in the U.S.
I got you.
But without the opinion. We don't need to tell people how to think about it, right? Tell them what's happening, and then, let them figure out how to think about it. For the most part, occasionally I'll let slip a comment. I can't help it. But for the most part, that's what it is. 20 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon. We got a great team of writers and researchers and producers. And it's proven that there is an appetite for just, God damn it, just tell us the news. Don't tell us
the facts,
what we're supposed to think about it. Yeah. Just give us the facts and then move on. And again, it's in this short format that allows people to listen quickly and pick up on the top 3 or 4 events of the day and then move on. So it's great. And from my perspective, I love it because it forces you to kind of stay in the mix, right? It forces you to stay informed.
To be current.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to be current. Exactly.
How's it going for you? Is it picking up steam? Is it doing well?
Yeah, we're making our way towards what? I guess we're making our way towards 4.5 million downloads a month.
Wow, it's doing well.
It's been, it's consistently in the charts anyway, in the top news podcasts in the country. And we occasionally, we beat NPR, we beat the Times. Right? I'm always happy when that happens. And look, we're never going to be, number one, I don't think, because we're not opinion, right?
Right.
If you're throwing red meat to your crowd, whether your crowd's on the right or left, okay, you're going to have a level of success, right? Because that's it.
You're neutral.
Yeah. So it's been, I tell you what, I would encourage, and I appreciate you letting me talk about it, but of course I'm going to encourage people to give it a try. It's on all the podcast platforms. We do a weekend show, an extended weekend show that hits the airwaves every Friday night on First TV. And then it's our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is @President's Daily Brief. That's going very well. But the weekend show, we have guests on, again, experts to talk about the key stories of that week. And, still relatively short format. And still to the point where we're just telling you what's happening and you figure out how to think about it.
So here's a good question, because we're getting a little bit towards the back end here. You've been on some major things. You've been on Joe Rogan, you've been on Gutfeld, and you've actually been on Jimmy Lee, the Dangerously Funny podcast. These are big things for you.
That is. It's kind of like the Triple Crown now at that point.
There it is. You could be a whore. You could be Willie Shoemaker. But tell me some of those experiences you've had, because you've been on some big stuff here.
Yeah, look, I think the world of you'd name those two guys, Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld. Rogan to me is his show works because, this is just my opinion. I mean, A, he's a terrific guy. B, he's genuinely curious, right? He's actually curious about everything, right? And he does that old school thing. Don Imus was another guy who was kind of in that mold, right? He would just ask, well, why? Or what? How? Right? Very, very straightforward, simple questions.
Yeah.
But he does it in a way, I think, that shows that he is genuinely interested and curious about this vast, wide spectrum of things.
Right.
And he's just a, he's funnier than shit, and he's just a great guy.
I noticed you were a lot looser on that one. And on Gutfeld, you were very serious. I noticed the difference of your personality, Mike. Well, not bad, but just different based on the personality, of the host.
Yeah. It's not even so much the host. I mean, look, I've known Greg Gutfeld for maybe 20 years at this point.
Wow.
And I used to do, Fox had this 3 a.m. in the East Coast show called Red Eye. It's a great show. You can say or do anything on that show.
Wow.
And in part because I don't think the News Corporation people knew they had a show on at 3 a.m.
That's funny.
At least at the outset. Yeah. But Greg is fantastic. He's a big-hearted guy. He doesn't maybe want you to know that, but he's super smart. I think he's the hardest working guy at Fox.
Wow.
So people sometimes say, look at that. Somehow he's had overnight success. That guy's been working his ass off for decades. But occasionally I try to get a little bit serious because sometimes he'll ask a question where he genuinely wants me to, give a somewhat of a serious answer. But I have a lot of respect for him. And he another guy who's, very smart, very funny. So I've been lucky in that sense. The opportunities, to get to know and become friends with guys like that is, priceless.
What about that guy, Jimmy Lee? What was your experience with him? The guy that does the Dangerously Funny with the weird glasses.
Yeah, that guy. Come on. No. This has been really enjoyable because because you're letting me bang on about things that from my perspective are fun to talk about, but including the China trade war.
What's your future goal? You're 63, correct?
Yeah, somewhere in that range. I don't look a day over.
You look younger. You look 50-something. But I always tell people I'm younger anyway. But here's the thing. You remind me a lot of me. I have, Mike, 2 careers. I'm a dentist. And I have a full-fledged comedy career where, I do street comedy all over the country. I work, like you said, Gutfeld, and you work. And certain people, they're like those A personalities, and they're very, very driven to succeed. And no matter what obstacle is there, they're going to keep going. And I'm, in your age realm, and I'm not slowing down. And my passion, has been to perform my whole life. And meeting you for maybe an hour, I see a little bit of me in you, or you and me, in that you really love this commentary stuff you do, almost like you're addicted to it, and you love doing it. When you talk about it, you get excited like I do. And I see you being around for a long time and kicking it and hustling. Am I reading you right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. And I think
Big
your
compliment.
attitude towards I think your attitude towards comedy and towards performing. I mean, I get that, because you have to. It's kind of what we talked about earlier. You're always kind of looking for that spark, right?
Yes.
That what really drives you, and then you kind of owe it to yourself, because life on this planet's pretty goddamn short.
Right.
Then you have to give it your all, right? I mean, I talk to my boys about this all the time. I said, look, the world's got enough average people, right? And so I always feel like as parents, our job is to make sure that we're not raising average people, right? And it doesn't mean they're going to be Olympians, doesn't mean they're going to win a Nobel Prize, but they got to find something that sparks them, and then they better work goddamn hard at it, right? Because if you're the hard, and that's all you can do, right? You can't control how fast you are, or how tall you're going to be, or whatever, I suppose, but you can control how hard you work.
You control your hustle. Yeah.
Yeah, you can control your hustle. Good way to put it. And I don't understand sometimes, I get it. Life beats you down, but I just feel like we just don't have much time here. And you gotta just constantly always strive, right? You gotta see, how well you can do in anything.
And I feel, Mike, as you get older, time becomes more important than money. When you're young, you don't have money and you have time. When you're older, you have some money and you have limited time. And I think time is your most valuable commodity as you get older. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to sound morbid, but you do find yourself, as you get older, you find yourself kind of thinking about your later days, right?
Yeah, and that depresses me. Exactly.
Yeah, I know. And you think, and now look, don't get me wrong. I genuinely can say this is the happiest period of my life. I've never been happy. I'm not sitting around thinking, geez, I wish I was younger. No, I enjoyed my younger self, but this is a great time, right?
You've evolved into a different person, kind of like me through my entertainment career. Not a better person, but a more full person.
Exactly. Yeah. And you see more opportunities. You see things a little bit differently, maybe. And so, but I do, I'd be lying if I didn't say that there are times when I'm driving around thinking, God damn, how many years do I legitimately have left?
Does your wife ever say, quit? I get that once in a while, but I think what's interesting, Mike, is when you're in this type of business, the entertainment sector, unless if you're in it, people that aren't in it really don't understand where your heart is and your love, and no matter how hard you get beat down, you feel good when you do it. It's not for money. If I was doing it for money, I would have quit a long time ago. I'm doing it because I love to do it, and I like to be around people and be funny. And you're doing it because you love the platform. And I can tell talking to you when you talk about how much you like it. And I think you got to continue doing it, like you said, and stay with it. You really do.
Yeah, there's a theory about, I forget what the name of the show was, but I watched this documentary, and it was talking about longevity. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that it talked about was they studied different groups of elderly people in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. And they were over in Japan because, again, there's this statistically, the Japanese are living longer. Mm-hmm. And so they're looking at, okay, what is it? Is it the diet? Is it the surroundings, the environment, whatever? Part of what they found that was so important was purpose, having purpose, right? That was a direct correlation to the longevity of an individual. Wow. And that just makes perfect sense to me, right? Mm-hmm. Because once you stop having that purpose, right? And whatever that is, right? Maybe you're doing something within the community. Who knows, right? Yeah. But that made perfect sense to me. And so I can't ever see a point down the road where I retire because I don't know what the hell I'd do.
Right. And then you don't have purpose and you would feel empty. Like I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything in closing, Mike, that you'd like to say about things or projects that are coming up for you that viewers would love to hear about?
Oh, I appreciate that, man. No, I think I was, look, you've given me an opportunity to talk about my company, the Portman Square Group. You've given me an opportunity to talk about the podcast, President's Daily Brief. We've got a couple of shows, TV shows in the works. I'm fortunate to be working with some really, really good people, talented people. And so we've got a couple of new series that we're in the middle of putting together. And I think, I'm contractually, I'm not supposed to talk about them just yet, but I think that'll be very entertaining down the road. I loved the Discovery TV series project and the Travel Channel and all the rest of it. So, we're keen to get back on the road and do another series similar to those. Okay. But other than that, no, I just appreciate the opportunity, man. This has been really, really enjoyable.
I really enjoyed meeting you. Where can people find you, Mike? On social media? Just
fly out to Idaho and then ask for me. People know where I am.
Go to the local diner.
That's right. I'm at the Stagecoach usually in Boise, which is the Stagecoach Inn, the greatest.
2 eggs over easy.
Yeah, man, it's a great bar and restaurant. But no, you know what? I'm on X, I guess what used to be known as Twitter at MB Company Man.
Okay.
And then again, our YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief.
Right.
I'd encourage people to check that out if they can. But yeah, other than that, no, this has really been enjoyable, Jimmy. And thank you again for asking me on, man.
No, I'm glad that we got hooked up. And I want to tell my viewers, don't forget to subscribe to my Patreon channel. You can see all the stuff, all the short clips we do, and behind the scenes things. $4.99 a month. If I don't like you, $8.99 a month. For Mike, complimentary, because he took an hour out of his day to hang out with the kid. Jimmy Lee, the Jersey Outlaw. Mike Baker, an English guy who did good. Very friendly with Tom Jones. They do a lot of music together. Have a good day, guys. Mike, I appreciate your time. Jimmy Lee, the Jersey Outlaw, Season 2. We ain't going anywhere.